This is KPPQ LP Ventura, 104.1 FM, and we're in the Women's Room, where we appreciate and support each other. I'm your host, Kathleen Good. My guest today is a very creative woman, Maryann Ridini Spencer. From time to time, I like to feature women who live creative lives and whose work enriches our lives. This is part 2 of an interview that we started a couple of weeks ago. And we had so much to talk about, I asked Maryann to come back. Hi, Maryann.
Hi.
So delighted to have you back again.
It's great to be here.
To talk about your creative projects and especially about your writing process. And I'm very interested, and we have been talking about how you integrated Hawaii into writing your novel. Now, we left off on how you were doing research for the book. The book is set in Kauai, and Kauai itself is almost a character. And I was just questioning in our last interview, Maryann, on the research. So let's start there.
Sure. Well, when we took a visit, my family and I, 2014 to Kauai, I knew I had to place my novel there. It was such a beautiful place, and although we had been to all the other Hawaiian islands many times, it was my first trip to Kauai.
Oh.
And there was something about where we stayed in Princeville and taking that trip into Hanalei town, going over that old steel bridge, nothing around you, miles and miles of green, tropical green, and to the right, the beautiful ocean, the Pacific Ocean, and those big, majestic mountains. I thought, oh my goodness, I feel like I'm in another time. I expected to see like some kind of a dinosaur come out from behind the mountains. I mean, I felt like I was back centuries.
Prehistoric.
Yeah. And it felt so good.
Oh, wow.
Because there was something in the air, the energy, and it felt timeless, ethereal, all these wonderful things. And I just said, oh my goodness, this is what I need. This is what the book needs, because Kate, my main character, goes through some self-discovery, spiritual, and finds out things about her life and her path in life. And this was just a great place to do it, I felt. And so the research was really traveling all around Kauai, finding places of interest. Now, I didn't know that I was necessarily going to use all these places in the book when I personally experienced them, but I used quite a few because they made such an impact on me. For example, in Hanalei, walking down the street close to the ocean, I just was walking along. My husband and son were doing something one day. They were going surfing, and I did window shopping, and I walked by down the road, and I was just looking at all the houses, which were very different. Some were big, some were small, some were more estates, some were cottagey. And as I turned the corner and I looked to my left, and I just saw the expansive Hanalei Bay with that beautiful pier. It just juts out right into several hundred feet out, and the mountains, and the mist was hanging in a certain way. It looked like a painting.
I'm going to be Googling this.
Yeah, you have to.
Yeah.
It was surreal. I just thought, I've never seen anything so beautiful in my life.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, this has got to go in the book. And so that was one example. So the research was just experiencing it myself, because as a writer, you want to write things that you experience or know about, or you've researched enough, you feel like you know about it or have been there.
Right.
And so because as you read, I want people to feel. I want people to see what my characters are feeling and seeing.
Right.
So if I don't, then they're not going to.
So do the Hawaiians, the ancient Hawaiians, have a written language?
Good question.
It just occurred to me when you were talking.
They must. Oh. Because the words are written.
Oh, okay.
All over.
Right.
I just don't know when it formulated.
Yeah. It just seems like it's a place you have to experience personally in order to write about it.
Well, you can look at the pictures and listen to the music, and you can get a pretty good feeling of how amazing it is.
Okay.
But I did do research. I spoke with one of the cultural practitioners there on the Big Island, because my husband and I, we have a place on the Big Island. And friends of ours gave me his name and number when I told them I needed some Hawaiian translations. I had looked up some things online, but I wanted to make sure that the Hawaiian translations were proper. And Danny Akaka Jr., who works at the Manolani, he works there and gives cultural tours there, also does all types of beautiful ceremonies, opening of shops and wonderful sacred ceremonies. So he was wonderful. And so he helped me with the Hawaiian translations, and I learned some things from him. And just doing a lot of reading and research myself on the aloha spirit and what ohana means, which family. But ohana is not only your blood family, it's your friends, your close friends and family. And it can be your work ohana, who you work with. And the spirit of aloha, and aloha means hello and goodbye, but the spirit of aloha, or living in the spirit of aloha, is treating everybody with respect and love and compassion and understanding, and also treating the earth that way. They're very tied into nature and the earth, and they understand the two. Really, one can't live without the other, and we need to be respectful of our earth. We need to be respectful of other people. We're all connected. And when people live with love and understanding and compassion, that uplifts the mana, or the spiritual essence of the entire planet.
Wow. Well, we need to keep this in mind.
The Aloha Spirit State Law was specifically developed for that reason.
Talk about that. And you said that in your researches, there was a woman who initiated this Aloha law?
Right. She was also a spiritual teacher. And in Hawaii, they have this beautiful tradition. Sometimes people are called auntie, uncle or auntie, and her name was Auntie Palahi. And she wrote it because she saw a 20th century in strife that would look to Hawaii for healing. So she was instrumental, along with some other people, in getting the adoption of the Aloha Spirit Law, or the Spirit of Aloha. It's state law that came into being, and it's just beautiful because the main thing is aloha is just a way of living and treating each other, and its meaning starts by teaching ourselves to love our own selves and then spread that love to others.
But how could they make this a law?
Because they actually, and you can Google the Aloha Spirit Law. It's an actual law that was encoded into the Hawaii Revised Statute, Section 5-7.5, actually.
To be specific.
Absolutely. And in it, it will state that aloha is more than a word of greeting or farewell or a salutation. Aloha means mutual regard and affection, and extends warmth and caring with no obligation in return. It's the essence of relationships in which each person is important to every other person for the collective existence. And it also means to hear what is not said, to see what cannot be seen, and to know the unknowable. And I just love it.
Yeah.
And it goes on longer. I mean, I can't read you the whole law. But these are some of the things in it. And I don't know if you can get arrested if you don't abide by it. But isn't it gorgeous that a state adopted it into their law of a way of treating people?
Oh, wow. Oh, we had to bring that over to the mainland.
Well, I think that was the intention. I think that was the intention, to spread it.
So all eyes are on Hawaii. Now, your main character, Kate, in the book, Lady in the Window, as well as her mother in the book, the character, believes in affirmations and uses them. Now, how would you define an affirmation, and do you use these in your own life?
I do. When I was a child, my mom actually is responsible for this. She would teach us how to visualize.
Oh, my goodness. That is quite a skill.
And then also we would affirm. So let's say if I wanted to get an A in the spelling bee, for example,
Uh-huh.
I had to see myself standing on the stage and feel those feelings and feel like I won, the spelling bee. And then I would give thanks, like, thank you, God, for having me win the spelling bee. Or, you might say just a positive statement that has to do with your desire. Of course, it's not necessarily for material things, but it's something that if you want to be a doctor, for example, or a nurse or a teacher, you see yourself doing it and having people be grateful, and you're grateful.
So you're actually feeling while you're seeing yourself.
You're seeing, and something about whatever it is in the ethos gets you, if you continue to do that and you see it and you affirm it. And there's books written on this. There was, I think Dr. Joseph Murphy wrote a book, and Norman Vincent Peale wrote a book about positive thinking. So it has to do with positive thinking, affirmations. Creative visualization was a very popular book, and it actually had a worksheet of how you go about doing it. And it was, so I think that when you do that and when you make those kind of positive statements, affirmations, beliefs, it becomes part of your belief. And then you create what is in your mind, you create in your existence. And you always say, if it be God's will, if it be the divine will.
Or the universe.
Right, the universe will, whatever you believe. Because sometimes we don't know the reasons why, but we still have to dream and hope and think. But if you keep that positive mindset, if you really want to do something and it's coming from an honest place within your heart, and it won't hurt somebody, and it's for the greater good, things have a way of manifesting. You may not even understand how it does, and that's the whole thing. When you read these books, it says, don't worry about the details. Think about the end result, and things will come into play while you learn about something, or someone may guide you to something. You don't have to always worry about the little minute details, but just see it in the bigger picture.
So you're kind of, because you're thinking this way, you're probably more open to opportunities as they come along.
Yes, you could you'll recognize them.
Right. Oh, well, that's really interesting. Always of interest in the women's room is the mother-daughter relationship. I'd like to have you describe the very positive one you portray in your book.
That relationship is mine with my mother.
Oh, I thought so. Or I was thinking so.
Yes. My dear mom.
Wonderful.
I was not necessarily planning to write that relationship into the book, because I started writing the book and then I changed it a few times. I mentioned in the first interview. It went through different settings, different things. But in 2014, in December, November, December, my mom passed.
Like in the book. Oh, I'm so sorry.
And however, I just felt her all around, and I received certain signs. Some of them I write about, some of them I don't. But my whole family experienced things together, and I do write about one of those things in the book. And I just feel that she was such a wonderful example of a mother, and the main thing about my character is she's a young girl with a great career and a good life ahead of her, but she wants to also have a relationship that's meaningful. And in this day and age, you can get caught up in a lot of things with work and just running around, and people have different value systems and things like that. She wanted what her parents had, which was a loving relationship, committed relationship. And people come to that point maybe at various points in their life. Well, she's at that point. And parts of her life aren't working exactly how she wants them to work. So she has to find a way to rectify that and live her authentic life. And where is it? And after certain things happen, I don't want to be a spoiler here, but when she experiences certain life changes and events, she's forced to kind of relook at everything in her life. And she goes to Kauai to kind of sit back, relax, and take a look and take a breath. And so that relationship with her mother, what she realizes, still continues. It's in spiritual form.
Right.
And I believe that.
And does that help with the grieving too?
It does. I think you understand it, but I also felt that's something the Hawaiians believe too. You know, they really are strongly connected to their descendants and people who have their ancestors who have passed. And I just thought it was so lovely how they feel about that. And many people on the mainland feel that way too. But I think that it's so important to, in my healing, it was very important to read about things that would be helpful. But also I always had this feeling and belief. And I actually wrote about it when I was younger. And I discovered an essay, a little short story that I wrote where that topic came up when I was 12 or 13, and I found it while I was reading this book. And I thought, oh my goodness, here I am writing about it, and I was writing about it and forgot when I was 12 or 13. And so what I did in the book, and this was so much fun.
And could you relate again for our listener what that experience was, just briefly?
Basically, I wrote about, in this little book called Jessica that I put together, a neighbor tells the young girl after her mother passes that, don't worry, dear, your mother is around us. Our loved ones always are around us, and they help guide us.
Yeah.
And so I was actually writing about it. And then when I looked at this old file, I thought, oh my goodness, here I am talking about it when I was 12 or 13, and now I'm writing about it in this novel.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really
it's kind of the line, like your lifeline.
It is. Well, you know, another thing, what I've always known to be true, because I've had experiences before I wrote this book, but Carl Jung came up with a term. It's his concept, synchronicity.
Oh.
And it means events that are meaningful coincidences, yet they occur with no casual relationship, but seem to be meaningful related. So have you ever said to yourself, what a coincidence?
Oh.
That's a synchronicity.
Uh-huh.
And so for me, going through those writings that I had when I was 12 while I was writing about the same thing, that was synchronicity.
Uh-huh.
But then not really. Maybe it was my path. Maybe it was something I'm supposed to be doing, and why I always had a desire to write about it.
Right.
You know, when I went to the Big Island for a vacation with my family, the book had already been written, and I had talked with Danny Akaka on the phone. He was the cultural practitioner that I mentioned earlier who helped me with the translations.
Okay, we're going to have to take a little break there. I just hated to have to stop you.
That's okay.
This is KPPQ LP Ventura, 104.1 FM, and we're in the Women's Room, where we appreciate and support each other. I'm your host, Kathleen Good. My guest today is a very creative woman, Maryann Ridini Spencer. From time to time, I like to feature women who live creative lives and whose work enriches our lives. This is the second time I'm talking to Maryann. We had so much to talk about about her creative process and how she uses it to write her novels. And we're back. So please carry on.
Sure. I was talking a little bit about synchronistic events. And one wonderful synchronistic event, after I had finished writing this novel, my husband and I vacationed in the Big Island. And I had talked with the Hawaiian cultural practitioner, Danny Akaka Jr., I mentioned earlier, who helped me with the Hawaiian translations. And I had only talked to him, though. And one morning, when we first got to the island, I got up early. I love to go for early morning walks. And I went into the Queen's Marketplace. And I saw this big crowd of people gathered around a store, but I didn't know what was going on. So I went and got my coffee, and then I walked over. I think I'm going to go over there. I don't know what made me do that, because normally I would just go right back. And I also, it was out of my path, but I walked over and I looked, and there was this man dressed in Hawaiian priest outfit saying some prayers. And I looked at the person next to me. I don't know why. I said, is that Danny Akaga Jr.? And the guy looked at me and he said, yes.
Oh.
I said, oh my goodness, I'm supposed to be meeting with him. And so I just had like a chill run up and down my spine. And after I waited and watched and introduced myself to him, and I just thought, that is such a synchronistic event. I mean, that is, I wasn't going to go that morning. I was going to go a different way. And then, so many different, but yet it happened. So a series of events that aren't really related, but yet are meaningfully related.
And it kind of showed you again that you were on the right path. Yeah.
And it happens, people always have things, if you think about it in your own life, how many times have you said, wow, what a coincidence. And so in the book, I also, because it's about spirit, it's about us living on earth and trying to live in our fullest lives, but it's also about our loved ones and how they help us. But you have to be attuned to the signs. And so I kind of go into what some of those signs are for my main character. And it's synchronistic events mainly, but there are also other little things if you're open to it. Again, because sometimes we get so busy and so clouded with all running here, running there, social media, this, that. But when she goes to Kauai, it's slower. So she's calmer. Her mind is more clear. She's on vacation. So it's a different thing, and she becomes aware. She might become aware in another place. It might take her a lot longer.
Right.
But because she's so at peace, even though she's healing and going through certain things, she becomes aware of, and she realizes, wait a second, there's something to all this. And then later on, it becomes even more solidified for her that yes, our loved ones do live on.
And also a message here that we should all maybe slow down a little bit.
Slow down, appreciate, live in the spirit, love your neighbor, be good to Earth, Mother Earth, appreciate what you have, be grateful. We only go this way once in this body. So you have to enjoy it and do the things you really want. You have to get in touch with what you want to do and go do it. Make the steps to do it.
Bring the good stuff into your life.
Bring the good stuff into your life. Throw the bad stuff out.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we started talking about the mother-daughter connection. Do you think that is the strongest one that we as women can experience?
I do. Although there are so many experiences. Like you have a deep experience with your husband or your spouse, your significant other. You may have a friend who feels like a sister from another mother. I do think it is because of the way we're brought into the world by our mother, it's a very important relationship. Not all of them are good, unfortunately. There are people that don't get along with their mother, or there are lots of things can happen, but no matter what, it is an important relationship, and it helps shape our life or how we look at life. And we have to process what that means. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it might be a little negative, but I do think it's, extremely, and it stays a very important relationship throughout your life. And I do know that when a loved one is departed, everything changes in your life. And you don't really realize it until you lose a parent or lose someone close to you. And you look at things differently, and you process things differently, and you have just a different outlook. And I think I also wanted to convey that in the novel because it does change what's important. And for me, in my own life, I really have always felt that loved ones are around me always. So I talk to them.
Oh.
Why not?
Yeah.
Hello, good morning. So not like full-length things sometimes, but if something pops into my mind, or I see a picture and I go, or something reminds me of my mom, I'll go, hi, Mom. Why not?
That's really sweet. I like that.
And so I incorporated that in the book, too.
What are some things that you do for inspiration? And you've talked about this a little in our first interview, but just to get yourself in the right mode for
when
writing.
I'm writing, I always love to put on music, usually instrumental. I'll light a candle. Sometimes I might even burn incense.
Ooh.
But I try to keep a space that is quiet and early in the morning when I can write without interruption, because I know once I start looking at the emails, once I start thinking about other jobs I have to do, it's not really good. I'm not focused, and I really want to be focused. So that's why I set a time for a short amount of time to write. But other things that inspire me could be a painting. It could be watching a film that there's a little kernel of something in there and I go, wow, what would happen if? And then I start to develop another story or an idea. It could be, reading. If you want to be a writer, you have to read things.
Oh, yeah.
So you have to be reading.
Right.
And that's, a number one thing that I would say, if there's anybody interested out there and wanting to write, you have to read. Just like if you want to make movies, you have to watch movies.
Exactly.
And and all different kinds, because you never know where you're going to get an idea. And when I go to visit a place, I like to investigate the history of the place. I might get a book on the area I'm visiting. I love, I think Google is fabulous because you can Google things.
Yeah.
And I
just have to go to the library.
And, being curious, talking to people. Sometimes people are fascinating and, they can give you a kernel of a story, or you think, oh, that's a great character. I have to remember that guy so I can put him in a book. You never know. But I think that art, music, all these things can influence you. And reading newspapers, what's going on in the world something can trigger you where you feel passionate enough that you want to devote time, because it does take a lot of time and effort to write about it.
Right.
So I think whatever your passion is, you have to know what your passion is. And if there's something comes in your purview that you go, oh, I want to write about that. Oh, I have to tell that story. That's key, because you have to feel compelled to sit down at your desk and to write, and then what it takes to go through the editing process and everything. You have to be passionate about it.
So passion. Do you have a muse?
No.
Maybe your mom?
My mom was definitely a muse for this book, and she is in book 2 because I wrote the sequel. It's being edited, so I don't know the exact date. But I think, if anything, I want to write about things that are uplifting and inspire hope. And also, in a way, even if I don't write about Hawaii, to write about what the aloha spirit means. To connect with how we're all connected.
It seems very much your philosophy of
It
life.
really is. And that's why I find it so beautiful, but I do think we are all connected, and we have to take care of the earth and each other.
Okay, well, let's leave it at that note. The time went so fast again. Thank you very much, Maryann. And I hope you'll return to the Women's Room with your next creative endeavor.
I'd love to.
This is KPPQ LP Ventura, 104.1 FM, and we're in the Women's Room, where we appreciate and support each other. I'm your host, Kathleen Good. My guest today was a very creative woman, Maryann Ridini Spencer, who has a long resume of creative work and has been talking to us about her creative writing process using her life experiences. And don't forget, In the Women's Room airs on Tuesday from 2 to 2:30 and Wednesday 8 to 8:30 a.m. For more information or information about Maryann Ridini Spencer, please contact me at radio.capsmedia.org. You can type "In the Women's Room" in the subject line.